I want to bring this back to American politics for a second, but I suspect that, look, I don't know the exact situation in Romania, but I assume it's probably not that different than America, where people are angry and frustrated at the institutions after a multiple decades of austerity. At least that is the case in a lot of Western European countries, where you're seeing a massive momentum and mobilization. Now let's talk about the Romanian elections, because something crazy happened here. Right-wing Calin Georgescu.
To Romania next, and a political earthquake in the making. The first round of the presidential election saw a pro-Russia candidate claim the most votes, knocking the...
Ukrainians are not pro-Putin. I didn't say that. I said Ukrainians, 52% of Ukrainians now, at least according to the latest estimates, want a ceasefire negotiation. I never said the Ukrainians are fucking pro-Putin. What the fuck? Why would they be pro-Putin? Putin is killing their fucking family members.
The pro-European Prime Minister out of the race in the process. Now, with nearly all of the votes counted, the far-right independent Calin Georgescu found himself with about 23% of the votes, with the centre-right candidate Elena Lasconi just behind. A runoff election will be held in 2 weeks to decide the winner. And joining me now from the Romanian capital, Bucharest, is political scientist Oana Valentina Suciu. Welcome to DW, Oana Valentina. Calin Georgescu came seemingly out of nowhere and knocked the pro-West...
It's so crazy that just everyone is a right-winger, by the way. Like, what is going on? It's just like, it seems like in Europe and in America and most places on the planet, it's now a heated battle between the far right and center right, including in America, the political battle that just took place.
An incumbent out of this presidential race. Can you tell us a little bit more about what he stands for and why he's suddenly become so popular?
Well, first of all, he didn't really come out of nowhere, because he's been quite active in the public space since the previous elections. His name has been associated with the one of the extremist far-right party, the Alliance for the Union of Romanians. What he stands for is what
Uruguay just elected a social democrat versus a center-right candidate. Uruguay's leftist party, the Broad Front, has won presidential elections, defeated the ruling neoliberal government of President Lacalle Pou. The president-elect, Yamandu Orsi, is seen as the protege of Pepe Mujica, former president and leftist guerrilla fighter.
We call...
Yeah, South America is experiencing, with the exception of Argentina, but we don't really talk about Argentina anyway. But South America is experiencing like a social democratic resurgence for the most part, while seemingly many of the other countries firmly within the sphere of influence of America is experiencing central right to far right parties winning elections, and it's usually the far right that are gaining momentum.
Populist. He's very pro-Russian. He is anti-NATO, anti the European EU values, anti-democracy, in favor of...
I want to bring this back to American politics for a second, but I suspect that, look, I don't know the exact situation in Romania, but I assume it's probably not that different than America, where people are angry and frustrated at the institutions after a multiple decades of austerity. At least that is the case in a lot of Western European countries, where you're seeing a massive momentum and mobilization in the fascist and far-right groups. So I suspect that they're angry at neoliberal management of democracy, and they're experiencing like economic shocks from global inflation. Like we're living in the post-COVID world, basically, where a lot of the all the powder kegs that were waiting to explode is now finally exploding. Post-Cold War, post-neoliberal victory, neoliberalism becoming the global hegemonic attitude, with center-right leadership desperately trying to maintain its status, and usually, as liberalism is failing, fascists are coming in to point to all of the failures and saying, look, we're gonna up. It's not doing right by you. We're gonna blow up, and focusing on immigration, focusing on marginalized populations and how they are causing these problems, and making the population even more reactionary, even more right wing by beefing up isolationist, nationalist sentiment.
Strong-handed leader. Some of his messages refer to Romania not respecting the rules and the regulations that is supposed to respect within the European Union and NATO. And last but not least, he is very much against Romania being a NATO member and paying its share of duties towards this organization.
More on that in a moment. But just, unlike many countries, people will be looking at Romania and saying this is a country that has so far resisted some of these nationalist appeals that you describe Mr. Georgescu as having. What's changed?
Yes and no. Romania has been resisting extreme populism, like the one represented by Mr. Georgescu. However, we have to bear in mind the results of the previous two rounds of elections, the parliamentarian elections and the European elections, where the Alliance for the Union of Romanians that I have been mentioning before won quite a sizable number of seats, both in the national parliament and in the European Parliament. So extreme far-right movements are not something new in the Romanian political milieu. They might have changed their names, but they have been existing ever since the fall of communism in December 1989. Călin Georgescu, in spite of the shock that many of the Western democratic inclined Romanian citizens think, Călin Georgescu is not something new in our political public space.
And you've described his sort of pro-Russia views, how he is anti-NATO, anti the European Union. If he is elected in 2 weeks, then what would that mean for Romania in partnerships, international partnerships like the European Union and NATO?
Well, let's remember that in the meantime, we have parliamentarian elections. Because we have 3 rounds of consecutive elections, that would be something extremely bad and dangerous for the position that Romania is holding right now, especially since we are one of the countries that has the longest borders with Ukraine. So first of all, that would mean the unconditional support that the Romanian state and Romanian government have been providing to Ukraine. This is the first thing that we thought of. In the long term, a potential Georgescu's election as the president of Romania would probably mean a complete resetting of the whole political system. We don't know exactly what to expect if we are to take seriously the kind of messages that he has been spreading in the last.
People are saying he was like in favor of Nazis in World War II, and he's like a fucking serial anti-vaxxer. Seems like Romania is getting a healthy dose of Americanism, baby. Oh, he praised the house orchestrators. Jesus fucking Christ, dude. He literally called Ion Antonescu, the prime minister of Romania during the a national hero. Jesus Christ.
2 months on certain social networks, that would probably mean getting much closer to Kremlin that many of the Romanian citizens would like or even believe in.
I feel like it's not even Holocaust denial, it's Holocaust support. Oh my God, Robert F. Kennedy will go to Romania. Movers and shakers on the leftist side have been wiped clean by, in many instances, NATO. I can't speak for Romania specifically, but that's usually how it worked in Western Europe. And with centrist, center-right parties constantly caving and capitulating to right-wing framing on issues in a desperate attempt to maintain neoliberalism, you end up having this resurgence of fascist movements because at least one party is recognizing the anger that people have. The other party is saying, no, you need to shut the fuck up about this anger. Neo-legionairism is a neo-fascist movement in Romania that emerged in the 1990s following the fall of communism in the country. It is endorsed by a series of organizations that claim to be the successors of the Iron Guard, whose followers were known as legionnaires. Founded by Cornelia Zelensky Codronau in 1927, its main characteristics include anti-Semitism, Eastern Orthodoxy, ethnic nationalism, and mysticism. This is a unique situation. Literally nobody knew who he is. He appeared overnight. Russian interference, likely. Isn't this what happened in Moldova too? Moldova, Mama Liga, where the fuck you at? Georgia has moved in the direction of having pro-Russian or Russian sympathetic leadership. Moldova has had a similar movement, and now Romania is undergoing the Moldova's pro-Russia guy lost. Sorry. And again, a lot of people are shocked because half of them have zero clue about this guy. He apparently rose up in like the last month. This makes the hard right guy Romanians were scared of look like a lib. My family and I were watching the elections. Romanians are typically very patriotic. My parents grew up in the Eastern Bloc era and saw the revolutions take down Kosovo. My dad was like, the Romanian people have woken up and finally chosen an independent. And then I had to talk to him about how this guy advocated for the legionary Romanian officials as martyrs fighting for the country. He had like a very nationalistic idea of some of those people he was condoning, and he wasn't fully aware of the genocide. Romanians have a lot of historical heroes that were conservative, and Ceausescu. The nationalism is similar to the U.S. My dad thought that an independent rising up would be good and didn't understand that this guy idolized the genocidal legionnaires from the 1930s. They have a very rose-colored glasses perspective on anyone who contributed to the creation of Romania, even dating back to erasing the brutal Roman conquest of the Dacians. A lot of old literature is also very nationalistic and populist. Yeah, he advocated for the guy who was directly responsible for the wiping of the Jewish population, even before the Nazis collaborated with them. He wrote part of, in one of the RFK Jr. books. Yeah, it seems like he's also like a fucking anti-vaxxer holistic guy. It seems like that probably played a role as well. His wife is a naturopath. Oh my God. What is happening, dude? Yo, the country, every country is cooked. A lot of younger people wanted the center-right Lasconi to win, at least in my area where I was born. Oh my God, I remember this. I think I remember this. Presidential candidate Calin Georgescu went to a frozen lake in the Carpathian Mountains during the COVID pandemic to tell people to go out and strengthen their immune system instead of taking the vaccines.
Am încredere în sistemul meu imunitar. Am încredere și credință deplină Creatorului, în Dumnezeu. Imunitatea mea.
No, Putin is not a vaccine skeptic at all. Are you kidding me? Putin is like a zero COVID guy. Putin is literally the guy that goes to the DSA meetings and is like, if everyone doesn't wear a mask in here, this is literally a Holocaust happening. Are you kidding me? Do you not remember during COVID what he was doing? He was scared shitless of COVID. He's a massive hypochondriac. He's not like, he doesn't fuck around with that shit at all.
Ține de suveranitatea ființei mele. Imunitatea vine și se antrenează doar în natură. Aici este realitatea. Aici este informația. Nu în laborator. De aceea nu mi-este frig. Nu simt frigul. Simt puterea. Simt că trăiesc. Sunt liber.
Yeah, dude. This motherfucker is the only person who's abiding by like social distancing rules, okay? Are you kidding me? Are those nuke buttons? I don't think so. Why isn't he making the rest of them distance? Because he don't give a fuck if they die. Anyway, not good. Just so you get an idea how topsy-turvy Romanian politics are, the center-right candidate is the most progressive one we had. Yeah. The true scale of modern nuclear weapons, I don't want to watch that.
Calin Georgescu, the far-right nationalist leader and political outlier, has just ridden roughshod over Romania's political establishment.
Oh my God, bro. Oh my God.
Mobilizing support on TikTok, with videos like this going viral, he has won the first round of the Romanian presidential election. The result has sent shockwaves across Romania and Europe. Mr. Georgescu ran a Romania First campaign. He has openly praised Russian President Vladimir Putin, is a critic of NATO, and has called for an end to aid to Ukraine.
Care înțeleg din atitudine
He left the country's far-right party after they criticised his pro-Russian, anti-NATO stance and has been called out for describing a Romanian World War II pro-Nazi leader as a national hero. With the country facing economic hardship, the vote is seen as a rejection of the status quo, a disquiet Georgescu has capitalised on.
The economic insecurity imposed on the Romanian people for 35 years turned into insecurity for the political parties. The Romanian people cried peace, and they cried out loud.
With no candidate securing 50% of the vote, he will now face the Liberal leader Elena Lasconi in a runoff in 2 weeks' time. Well, we can talk now to Sir Tony Brenton, who's a former ambassador to Russia. If you're sitting in Ukraine, are you looking at the ground around you and thinking it's not as firm as you thought?
Well, yes, certainly. I mean, the war doesn't seem to be going very well for them. The election of Trump has been presented as a disaster. It's not entirely clear, but it may be.
Hello,
and
viewers.
you've just pointed to this election in Romania, which actually succeeds the rise of the far right in a fair number of EU countries. And the far right in general is much more sympathetic to Russia than to Ukraine.
So any idea that were America to carry through with any sort of threat to scale down its support for Ukraine would result in Europe stepping into the breach is looking a lot less certain, isn't it?
That's a very good question. And I think European leaders are discussing it rather intensely at the moment. And the question is, do they have the adequate force to fill a US-sized gap in support for Ukraine? And even if they have, can they coordinate adequately to do it? I don't know the answer to that question. I detect a lot of anxiety on the part of everybody. The talks between France and the UK yesterday were an illustration of determination to at least test out the possibility.
Can you sort of interpret the British position for us for a moment? I mean, is it as straightforward as it seems?
Does your stance on Russia make you far right? What's my stance on Russia that would make me far right? I don't think my stance on Russia is similar to any number of these different ghouls and goblins. The problem is a lot of people that are pro-Russia are not going to openly state that they're pro-Russia because, you know, then a lot of people are going to be like, what the fuck are you saying? But that's politicians in general. They're not going to fucking openly admit their desires. No politician is going to be like, we want to kill the poor. You know, they're going to say, no, we want to democratize or liberalize our economy. We need to cut the red tape and deregulate.
That Britain will support Ukraine to the end and believes that Ukraine should fight its way to victory?
Yes, I think it is. We were in the lead when the war started. We've been in the lead in getting the EU and the wider West to supply Ukraine with weapons and all the rest of it. I think British ministers and the British establishment rather pride themselves on the role that we've played. The downside is that we are now very high on Russia's list of number one enemies. And for example, this unfortunate man, James Anderson, who's just fallen into Russian hands, we have rather limited means to get him out. And there must be a certain amount of pessimism. Frankly, as I watch the atmosphere, which I do quite closely here, I watched a number of distinguished commentators like Lord Dannett move away from the flat position. We must back Ukraine.
Is the UK an exception to the far right swing? Fuck no. The UK is exactly the same method. The UK has a completely captive right-wing Labour leadership now that is creating the perfect conditions for the Reform Party, just like out and about fascists, to take over next time elections are held. You'll see. Like every single one of these countries are basically trying to extend the reign of center-right neoliberalism to the best of their ability. And if they do not, it's so funny because every EU chatter a couple years back used to always joke and be like, oh, we're watching America fall apart, haha. And I kept telling them, like, motherfucker, this shit's about to destroy. This shit is about to, in a couple years, absolutely destroy the European Union. I kept saying it over and over again. I was like, bro, what's happening here in America? Like last election cycle, a shit ton of EU chatters would like always be like, man, your country is surely a clown show. And I was like, bro, I'm telling you, it's going to happen to you too. At that point, the nascent AFD and Le Pen's like popularity was only beginning. Look at them now. And it's not just like Le Pen herself. It's the movement that she represents.
a serious training role to make a huge amount of difference now. And my instinct is that we are on the route towards negotiations. It's pretty clear the sort of landing area that those.
But even if Le Pen goes to prison, it still doesn't change much.
Negotiations are going to be pointing towards, which include Ukrainian territorial concessions. And if Trump plays his cards right, he will achieve a major diplomatic triumph in getting us there, ending the war, which Biden has solidly backed for the last 2.5 years, and will feel pretty good about himself. Now, the trick, however, is to do that without completely abandoning Ukraine. The way things are going, Ukraine will come out of this, yes, perhaps having agreed to agreed to a ceasefire, which leaves a lot of land in Russian hands, even though they don't formally concede it, and leaves Ukraine, feeling rather bruised by it all, but also leaves Ukraine as a Western-oriented state linked to the West, prospects not immediately, but in the longer term, of NATO membership, of EU membership. So essentially, actually, having won the war. But we're not there yet. And a lot of this is going to depend upon, how can I put this, Trump's diplomatic sophistication as the negotiations get going. And it has to be said, the diplomatic sophistication is not something that Trump is famous for.
So Tony Brenton, thank you very much indeed.